Autumn was already in full swing, rushing to blanket everything with fallen leaves, like a cover. A hurricane-force wind was blowing, and rain poured down. Because of this, stepping outside was the last thing anyone wanted to do. The branches of trees were cracking, losing not only leaves under the onslaught of the storm but also broken off twigs, which, as they fell onto the asphalt, tightly clogged the storm drains. Looking out the window, I shivered. No, I definitely wouldn't be stepping outside today. And really, why would I? Everything I needed was right here. My trusty laptop with work files and a couple of top-rated shooter games, the TV remote, and of course, the refrigerator stocked with enough supplies to get me through for a while. Couldn't do without that. Today, I got up quite late, almost 3 p.m., and that's all because I stayed up with work documents until the early morning hours yesterday. Looking at the calendar, I let out a surprised whistle. Wow, it's Halloween today! Time really flies. I'd have to watch the original movie in my downtime. John Carpenter, even nearly 50 years later, is still great. Picking up the TV remote, I turned on the local news out of habit. A pretty blonde was talking on screen. I couldn't remember her name, or maybe I'd never known it. A storm warning has been issued for the state of Ohio. The hurricane has been given the highest danger classification. Residents are advised not to leave their homes unless absolutely necessary and, if possible, to stock up on drinking water and supplies for a few days. The anchor sang out in a melodious voice. I shook my head and, mocking the blonde, remarked, "How thoughtful of them. Stay home if possible. But who's going to work if everyone just stays in their apartments?" Hearing the shuffling, my dog, Burger, immediately ran over to greet me. "Hey there, miss me? You could have woken me up a bit earlier, sleepyhead," I said. I didn't name him Burger because of any resemblance to a certain type of food. Not at all. That name comes from a darker story, one that's still not easy for me to share even now. But oh well, he doesn't mind. He just wags his little stump of a tail and is happy as ever. I found him as a puppy after seeing a homeless man on the street carrying a strange bundle. It looked a bit like a burger. Normally, that wouldn't have been a big deal, except the bundle in the man's hands was suspiciously moving, which triggered a wave of anger in me. My suspicions were correct. Calling out to the man, I yanked the bag from his hands in one swift motion and looked inside. At the bottom, a small puppy was wriggling around. I picked up the puppy and called the police, followed by the sanitation and epidemiological service. It turned out that the homeless individuals had been killing hundreds of stray animals to make cheap products. Powerful meat grinders had been grinding up their remains. If I hadn't noticed that homeless man with the moving bundle, this incident might have eventually faded from my memory. But no, during the inspection of the back room at the local burger joint, an amputated arm, severed at the shoulder joint, was discovered under one of the tables. A human hand. Nearby was a small galvanized bucket filled with metal dentures and collars. But the worst sight was the bag containing the hair of murdered victims. Long, snake-like strands of multicolored men's and women's hair, crawling with lice and cockroaches, involuntarily triggered a gag reflex in anyone who saw it. Even the most seasoned detectives felt uneasy. After all, anyone could have eaten burgers made with that miracle meat. The owner of the burger joint was immediately arrested, and I, being a lawyer by profession, was already preparing to defend him out of duty. But the enterprising businessman didn't wait for the trial. While in a police holding cell, he bit through his own veins at night, and then lay in a pool of his own blood, staring blankly at the ceiling. His cellmates claimed they hadn't seen a thing, but who knows if that was true? Try verifying it now. Still, that murderer kicked the bucket. Served him right. Although, it's a pity, really, he would have made an interesting addition to my handwritten collection of stories about the most notorious scoundrels and serial killers I've encountered. Many people hated me for not shying away from defending maniacs, Satanists, and even cannibals. But someone had to do it. After all, by law, even the most notorious dismemberer has the right to qualified legal assistance and defense, regardless of the fact that his stomach may still be churning with a stew of undigested human flesh. At times, my schedule was all over the place. I could work around the clock for days and then spend several days just resting on the couch. It's only in movies that a criminal defense attorney never leaves detention centers and spends nights at police stations, embracing criminals caught red-handed and other vile characters. My name is John Kot. To my friends, just Kot. My business cards are in every police station in the city, and every detective knows who to call when they encounter yet another monster in human form. Unfortunately, because of the nature of my work, I often run into problems. Recently, for instance, I defended a serial killer in court who, before being caught, had tried to practice his craft on himself, but didn't succeed. One of his eyes popped out, but the maniac survived, only partially damaging his brain with the awl tip. Because of this, some of his reflexes stopped functioning, and in the courtroom, he would urinate on himself and drool uncontrollably. When the verdict was announced, the maniac soiled himself loudly, provoking the guards' anger, who then took to him with their batons. I couldn't save him from a life sentence, nor did I particularly want to be honest. Nevertheless, the relatives of the maniac's victims took revenge by dousing my car with green paint and covering it with spray foam, as if I were the one wielding an awl in alleyways, aiming for people's eyes. Since then, I leave my old car only at paid parking lots. It's expensive, but it gives me peace of mind. I never share my address with anyone, and I try to go by a second, fictitious name wherever possible. After all, many would love to send me to the next world, even though I'm just a lawyer, an attorney defending the darkest spawn of humanity. My fascination with mysticism and all forms of horror is to blame. That's why I was never afraid to enter a cell with the most hardened criminals, ready to listen to their confessions as I prepared their defense. Tired of waiting for his meal, Burger eagerly stretched toward the refrigerator. I opened it with a smile. My dog wasn't a fool and preferred only boiled meat, turning his nose up at canned food, especially after he himself almost became burger filling. It's been a while since I had any work, buddy. And money has a way of running out. If this keeps up, I might have to switch to eating cheburiki myself, I said with a smile. Burger, a smart dog, listened intently and then looked at me with a long, unblinking stare. Outside, the rain began to pound again, and a second later, a powerful gust of wind tore the satellite dish off the roof and hurled it into a store window like a throwing disc. The sound of shattering glass and the screams of drenched passers-by filled the air. I shook my head and trudged off to find my smartphone to check my email and missed calls. At night, I always put my phone on silent. Who knows who might decide to call in the middle of the night? The blinking missed call icon on the screen instantly gave me a surge of energy. People rarely call me without a reason. To be honest, my acquaintances are a bit wary of me, thinking I've absorbed some kind of dark energy from my clients. But of course, that's not true. I let the cases of killers pass through me, but none of them leave a mark on my heart. The caller's number was unfamiliar to me. Wondering who it could be, I decided to call back. Listening to the long rings was unpleasant, but I forced myself to wait until someone picked up. "Hello, did you call me?" I asked. On the other end, I heard an annoyed sigh. "Yeah, I did. Deputy Lieutenant Donald Brake here. So, we've got an absolute horror show on our hands. I caught a maniac at the scene, dismemberment and all. And here's the thing, he's asking for you by name. Even gave me your business card." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Dismemberment? Are you sure he did it? And why aren't you taking him to the police station?" The lieutenant hesitated awkwardly and took a moment to find his words. "You see, it's not that simple. 3 people murdered. I did call the district, and they said they'd send a vehicle and an investigative team. But have you seen the weather? The roads washed out, the old bridge collapsed, and trees are falling one after another. The local post office got crushed by an old maple. Nature, damn it. So, there's only one road left, along the dirt path from the other side of the neighborhood. For now, I've locked the suspect in the basement of the local church," the deputy said, and I snorted in confusion. "The church basement? What, are you planning to exorcise him or something?" No exorcisms. It's just that the basement there is solid, the walls are a meter thick, built before the revolution. The doors are oak, reinforced with sheet metal," the deputy responded, and I caught a hint of offense in his voice, so I quickly tried to smooth things over. All right, Lieutenant, don't get worked up. If you need me to come, I will, no problem. But can you tell me exactly what he did or not?" The officer hesitated slightly, as if choosing his words, then blurted out. "Mass murder, seems ritualistic. 3 people killed in a clearing, and apparently it's somehow connected to Halloween. Anyway, come over and see for yourself." Hearing about the number of victims, I perked up noticeably. This case was bound to make waves, which meant I could score another point for my already complicated karma. "All right, I'll come, but don't tell anyone about this case outside the district police, okay? I want to personally sort out what's going on." "All right, John, I'll be waiting. Just be careful, and don't get too close to the trees. The landmark is the church building. I'm sure you'll find it. Hurry, it gets dark early these days." The deputy nodded. I nodded in agreement and ended the call. My mood improved noticeably, despite the howling wind outside. Finally, I was back in action. Sure, the weather was rough, but I wouldn't be going on foot, I'd drive. No problem there. And with Halloween around the corner, all the better. This maniac's case would likely draw plenty of attention, and a line of eager clients would soon follow. It was the same before when I represented a young guy in court whose father worked at a crematorium and vanished along with his mother after a botched cremation. I can still remember how that mysterious case of the 2 missing people unfolded. At that memorable trial, no one wanted to represent the young guy who, by all appearances, had sent his own parents to the afterlife. And he'd lost his mind in the process. It became a real sensation in the investigation. The case took place in the provinces, in a small village, and the locals insisted that the defendant's grandfather had been taken by a creature with the body of a human and the head of a pig. The young man swore that his grandfather would leave out a bowl of food at night so that the pig-headed being wouldn't bother them. Of course, I pretended to believe his ravings, then arranged for a medical evaluation and proved the defendant's insanity. As for who actually sent his grandfather to the next world, that doesn't interest me. After that, people started talking about me as a lawyer with a slippery reputation, someone capable of wriggling out of any mess and pulling the noose from around a defendant's neck at the very last moment. The case that truly made me famous was the trial involving the friends of a guy who had set up a hidden camera in his apartment. The poor guy hid the device under a pile of junk and started recording. The video shocked his friends. It showed a woman with a knife rummaging through his things, then disappearing into the depths of the closet. A couple of days later, the owner of the camera was found dead, and suspicion fell on his friends. But I quickly proved their innocence, establishing an alibi for each of them. In the end, my clients walked free, and the murder became a cold case. As a memento of the case, I even kept that very same video camera, though it's a shame the memory card was removed. But oh well. This case had plenty of mysteries, including a trial involving 2 schoolgirls who nearly ate their classmate, and an incident with footage capturing an actual murder. For some time now, I've been meticulously recording all of these cases in my secret journal, which is kept deep inside my home's safe. Who knows, maybe one day in my old age, I'll decide to write a memoir. Meanwhile, the weather outside had noticeably worsened. The wind was now unabashedly bending trees to the ground, as if forcing them to bow to mythical gods. Power outages began in different parts of the city, and rivers of mud, mixed with waste from flooded sewers and fallen leaves, flowed through the streets. Damn, why the hell did I agree to this trip to the village? I thought, glancing at Berger with a sigh. It was like a prolonged abstinence, where the desire to achieve the goal was so strong you were willing to do anything. Berger whimpered softly, as if pleading with me. Come on, don't go out at night, be reasonable. No, Burger, don't even try. I'm going anyway. You don't want to switch from boiled meat to dry kibble, do you? I looked at him seriously. The dog, as if understanding, barked in agreement and wagged his stubby tail. I smiled, put on a short rain jacket with a hood over my hoodie and jeans, and made sure to bring along the revolver in its holster, a purchase I'd made right after finishing law school. Better to be judged by 12 jurors than have drunk scumbags dance on my grave after slicing me up in a dark alley. Outside, it was pure chaos, as if the heavens had temporarily switched places with the underworld. I made it to the paid parking lot almost at a run, splashing through puddles in rubber boots. No dress shoes for this weather. And why would I need them, heading out to a village to wade through mud? There are plenty of people to handle that without me. I'd rather save my Italian suede shoes for the regional courthouse. Sitting behind the wheel of my well-worn SUV, I felt a relative sense of security. Glancing briefly at my wristwatch, I started the engine and, with a sharp turn, left the parking lot, ignoring the angry shouts of the elderly security guard, holding a stack of tickets in one hand and a pencil in the other. Driving was difficult. The wipers worked almost non-stop, barely keeping up with the torrents of water pouring down on our town from the sky. I had been here before. Nothing special, just an ordinary provincial backwater, filled with superstitions and prejudices, mostly spread by the elderly. Only when I turned onto the dirt road the deputy had indicated did I realize this task wouldn't be easy. Fallen trees lay here and there, and streams of rainwater had already carved the road into several pieces, as if a butcher had chopped it into chunks like a ham. Turning on my favorite rock track about forests and wolves, I pushed aside my anxious thoughts and tried to focus on the road, operating almost on autopilot. Gradually, I maneuvered around one fallen tree after another, at least a dozen in total. But when an oak tree crashed down behind me under a powerful gust of wind, I realized with horror that my way back was cut off. "Well, I've really gotten myself into it now," I exclaimed in frustration, hitting the steering wheel with my fist. My heart started pounding harder, and a bitter taste filled my mouth, but it was too late to turn back. The only option was to keep going forward, into this very town where the recent mass murder had occurred. I managed the rest of the drive relatively well. There were fewer fallen trees, and the hurricane-force gusts had shifted slightly, skirting the village in a long arc. I spotted the church from a distance, an old wooden building with a dome and cross that gleamed with traces of gold. Though I had never been superstitious, I felt a bit uneasy. A bloodthirsty maniac locked in the basement of a village church. It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. At the turn toward the church, I saw a policeman in uniform. He silently pointed toward the edge of the forest, where, as I understood, the murder had taken place. "Well, this is a good opportunity. I'll check things out myself before the investigative team arrives. Though, will they even make it here, considering the fallen oak behind me?" I thought, turning the wheel carefully and driving through the mud to avoid splashing him. The lieutenant, unwilling to get in the car, trudged along behind me with a gloomy expression. As I pulled up to the clearing, I noticed a huge, dark crimson stain of pooled liquid in the center. "What is that? Could it really be blood?" Turning off the engine, I got out of the car and, on shaky legs, walked closer. What I saw there made me feel uneasy. In the clearing, 3 mutilated bodies lay in unnatural poses, or rather, what was left of them. Each one had been disemboweled, with raindrops filling the hollowed cavities of their abdomens. I could tell this by the distinct steaming wounds on their chests, which had formed from rough trauma to the ribs. I heard footsteps behind me and, without turning, I knew it was the deputy. "Who did this to them, Lieutenant? Was it really your suspect?" The policeman sniffled, making it clear he'd gotten quite cold waiting for me in the rain. "Yes, John, that lunatic came to me himself, covered in blood from head to toe, holding a knife, and with a necklace of intestines around his neck. He kept rambling about Halloween and some kind of 25-year cycle," the lieutenant replied. I flinched and looked at the deputy in surprise. He didn't exactly look intimidating, but apparently, he had managed to apprehend this butcher. He doesn't seem like much of a giant, yet he managed to detain such a killer? I thought, sizing him up with astonishment. I was about the same age myself, young and eager. Pushing aside the intrusive thought about age, I asked the deputy, "Where did he get my business card, and who is he anyway? This lunatic has a name, I hope? Give me a rundown on him, Lieutenant, and then I'll speak with him personally. He's in handcuffs, right?" The deputy smirked. "Don't worry, Counselor, of course he's in handcuffs, with chains on his legs. So, this shepherd is a local. His name's Michael, 25 years old. He arrived recently, about 2 months ago, and was herding sheep. Gloomy, reclusive, a grumbler. The local said that he, pardon the bluntness, was cohabiting with the sheep, but of course, I don't believe that. Though, it's a fact that he had his oddities." I shook my head and asked the question that still intrigued me. "And who did he kill? Have the identities been established, at least approximately?" The deputy's expression darkened as he adjusted the hood of his coat. "Can't say for certain, but most likely they were outsiders. They came from the city to the clearing to celebrate Halloween. Brought pumpkins, all the ritual stuff, candles, robes, that sort of thing. Apparently, Fyodor didn't like it, so he sent them to the afterlife with a knife, carved up all 3 of them." "And what about the entrails then?" I pressed on. Shrugging under the intensified rain, the deputy blew his nose loudly and wiped his hand on his raincoat. "Now, that part one don't know. But Michael said he'd tell everything only to you, and that he'd fully confess before the police arrive." I grimaced but had no choice. "All right, take me to your basement. Let's see what this Michael is all about." The deputy headed toward the church basement, with the entrance located outside. The entire way there, I couldn't shake a strange sense of the irrationality of everything happening. Why wasn't there any light in the windows? Maybe the hurricane was responsible. What am I even doing in this godforsaken village? Damn it! And why did I come here at night, of all times? Twilight is already setting in, and I still have to listen to a maniac's confession. Alright, to hell with it. Where haven't we ended up before? Soon the lieutenant brought me to a massive door and started working on a huge barn lock. "Ugh, these Michael Butcher types," he muttered. After struggling with the lock, the lieutenant finally swung the door open and stepped aside, letting me go in. In the room, a dim kerosene lamp flickered, and the air was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and something else, reminiscent of excrement. I boldly stepped over the threshold, planning to impress the deputy with my bravery, but at that moment, someone struck me hard on the back of the head, and everything instantly went hazy. As I was losing consciousness, I tried to turn around, but the same strong hand shoved me inside, straight into the lair of Michael the killer, awaiting his next victim. Dear God, how did I manage to walk into this so easily? This seemed like a trap from the very beginning. The terrible thought flashed through my mind just before everything went dark.